Welcome back, folks, to episode 92. I have some shocking news for you all. I've just checked my poker bankroll tracker, and turns out we are down $4,755 at Park across 107 hours. That's just gotta be run bad, right?
Stage 1. Denial.
I mean, right? So, we're gonna head on down to Park, we're gonna go fix this little rounding error, and get back in the positive at Park Casino.
We are playing some 2-5 over at Park, in for the max 1500, but if you are in Vancouver and looking to play bigger than 2-5, I'm going to try to get a semi-private 5, 10, 20 game going at a casino. Undecided at this time. The buy-in amount I'm hoping to do around 5 to 10,000, but it's all up in the air. If you would like to play with me, send me a message over on Twitter. It is at BluffLowSam. That's it. Send me a message. I will try to get everyone into the game, and we'll rotate and hopefully be a weekly thing on Sundays. That out of the way, let's get straight back into the hand. We raise the 8-6 of hearts up to $15. Folds around to a reg, who now puts in the 3-bet up to $50. We get two cold callers, and when it folds back to me, I think there's no other choice but to call. I guess we could raise, but this time I call. 4 ways to a flop of Queen 10, 9, 2 hearts, 1 spade. We have a terrible gut shot here to the jack, but we've got a good one to the 7. We've also got the flush draw, so all in all, a pretty good flop for us. Big blind checks. Could think about leading here, but I think it's... I don't know. I check, and action checks all the way through. Head to the turn, it is the 6 of clubs. Now we pick up a pair as well with our monster draw. When checks to me, I'm definitely going to start betting here. I want to thin the field out, build a pot for when we inevitably hit one of our many outs. So I put in a wager of $75. Original razor calls and both the other cold callers fold. Heads up to the river, and it's the 4 of hearts. We make our flush. Now, my opponent probably only has a 1-pair type hand. Hand like pocket queens, 10s, 9s, like a set or a straight, would probably be betting on the flop. Especially since we're 4 ways, it's pretty connected. But a hand like pocket kings or aces or even jacks is going to play quite defensively, so I think he's only going to have, at best, a 1-pair hand. And I don't think I can get even a 1/3 bet out of him versus a 1-pair hand. So I decided to go very small, and I can balance this with getting some thin value with hands like 10-9 or Queen 10. So I put in a bet, 10% pot of $35, and my opponent says, I guess I can pay that off. That sounds good. He calls, and we are winning the first hand of the session. We have a slightly better hand, pocket jacks. We have a very good reg who's raised in early position, and we could either call or re-raise here. This time I do decide to re-raise. Folds back around, and only my opponent makes the call. Heads up to a flop of Queen 9-5, 2 spades, 1 heart. Opponent checks, and I could go for a bet here, but I think jack's a little bit too middling considering I want to bet quite big on this flop, so I'm just going to check this back. We get a pretty nice turn. It's the 10 of hearts, so we do have the open-ender, and now there's 2 flush draws on board. So when opponent checks, I think there's plenty of hands we can get value from, so I put in a bet of 65. My opponent calls, and we're going to take a river. It is the 9 of diamonds. My opponent checks it once again, and the 9 does hit him a little bit, but he could also be betting out with a 9 on the turn. So I think this is a spot where we can go for some pretty thin value. So I assemble a bet, and it's going to be a hefty one. $200 into the middle. Got to bet thin to win. My opponent is thinking it over and decides on a call. We table our hand, and it's good. Our jacks are good, and we're off to a great start this session. We open up the king-jack offsuit and the hijack up to $15. The player from the first hand now re-raises once again the small blind up to 60. When it folds back to me, it's a hand you mostly want to fold. But since these raises are from later positions, I'm going to choose more aggression, and I put in the 4-bet up to $150. My opponent thinks about it, and then tosses in the call. We head to a flop of Queen 9-4, 2 diamonds, 1 club. When my opponent checks to me, I think it's a board I'm mostly going to be wanting to check, especially with this hand. But 4-bet pots, I think players don't play them aggressively enough, so I'm going to use a little bit of an exploit and just go for a 1/4 pot bet with my entire range here, just because I don't think they're going to defend well enough. So I make it 75. And now my opponent raises up to $300. There's not much we can do here. It's a little bit of a weird raise considering I was a 4-better and he can really only have pocket queens here for a premium. Maybe aces at trap, but I feel like those hands are gonna want to play defensively just to protect his hands like ace king and, you know, his ace queen type hands. But anyways, we're not gonna call with our gut shot here, so we fold. And we are playing winner shows 1. My opponent shows the ace of spades. So I don't think that was a bluff. He probably just had pocket aces there. Yeah, what can you do? Hijack has opened to 15. Small blind has called. We look down at a suited jack in the big blind. We obviously toss in the call. 3 ways to a flop of 10, 9, 8 rainbow. We've got the backdoor flush draw as well as the open ender. Small blind checks, I check, and hijack checks behind. Hand to the turn, it is the 9 of hearts, not a great card. And now small blind leads out for 25. We still have an open ender. We are going to call. We're in position. And hijack gets out the way. River is another 9, trips on the board, and my opponent once again bets for $50. I don't know about this. I don't think he's particularly strong here. And I'm going to turn my hand into a bluff. On these trip boards or double paired boards, you don't need to go big. And I almost always use a min-raise size here. So that is exactly what I do. $100. And my opponent already hates it, which is good news to me. And he shows us the Jack 7 for the flop straight and finds the fold. And we're going to pick that one up. Hijack has raised to $20. And we look down at a suited King 10 in the small blind. We bump up the price of poker to $80. Fold back, and my opponent makes a call. Head to a flop of ace, 6, 5, 2 spades, 1 heart. Not a whole lot going on for us here. This should probably just be a check fold, but I'm going to take one stab at it and then give up. So I put about a half pot bet here, $80. And we get raised to 200. We are getting raised in another 3 or 4 bet pot on a board that's much better for us again. Stage 2. Anger.
Well, this is mildly infuriating.
We have a very action player at the table who has blind raised to $50. We're next to act, and we look down at Queen 10 of hearts. Good enough for a raise, so I bump it up to 100. Folds around, and only my opponent makes the call. Heads up to a flop of Jack 7, 5, 2 diamonds, 1 spade. Nothing going on for us here. Could bet, but this time I just decide to check it. Turn is the deuce of clubs. Once again, my opponent checks, and I'm just going to check this one again. River is the king of hearts. Opponent once again checks, and I think it's time to turn my hand into a bluff here. We're getting pretty low in our range here, and I don't think queen high is going to be good. So I put in a bet of 125. My opponent asks, do I have the king? I hope so. But eventually he decides he has a pair he can't fold, makes the call, and we're up against the 7-4. Okay, so my session has taken a turn for the worse. We are very card dead, playing a ton of small pots, just like this hand here, and we have actually reloaded about $800 at this point. But hijack has raised to 15. This time I decide to call, and this invites a small blind in as well. 3 ways to a flop of 3, 3, deuce, 2 diamonds, 1 heart. Small blind checks, hijack bets 15, and even with a player behind, I just think we are good here often enough, especially for this size. So I make the call, and so does small blind. Turn is the king of spades. Action checks to me. Just going to check this one back. River is another deuce. So feeling pretty good about my hand, but unfortunately now I think we are chopping with someone. But action once again checks to me. Just going to check this back. We beat hijack, but small blind has the king jack, and he is going to take this one down. Not a big pot or anything, but just to illustrate about a 3 to 4 hour period of my session with lots of small hands like this. In this next hand, we have an under the gun raise to 15. 2 callers, and I look down at ace 5 of clubs in the hijack. Normally this would be a very high frequency squeeze for me, but we're facing a raise from early position, and early position is a very good reg. We have 2 players that called in between who are not regs, so I'm very happy to play a hand like this multi-way. It's going to make some very strong hands, and more people in is better than one, especially if that one player is better than me. So I make the call. This also invites in 2 more players, so we're going 6 ways to this flop. comes down quite nice. It is king, 9, 6, 2 clubs, 1 spade. We have the nut flush draw. The original raiser checks, and now the player to his left puts in a big bet of $75. Low jack folds, and it's on me. I don't want to raise here. This is a very strong bet into 6 players, into 5, I guess. So I think he's got at least 2 pair here. I don't think he's going to hand like ace king, maybe king queen, but I think he likely just has a set or 2 pair here. So we're going to hope to hit our flush. We make the call and everyone else folds. On to the turn. Stage 3. Bargaining.
Please, poker gods, just let me hit a club on this turn and stack my opponent. Please, I will never, ever 3-bet 7-5 suited again. Just let me hit this club. Amen.
It is the king of diamonds. We do not make our flush, and now my opponent checks it to me. And I am extremely suspicious here. I don't think he's got 9-6 suited, as all his 2 pairs are now a full house. So I think we're just dead here. Maybe he has king queen, but even that's never folding, so what's the point in betting? So I'm just going to check this one back. River, the 4 of spades. My opponent assembles a very large wager of $200, and we fold. We are now in the game for $2,500. Around an hour has passed since the last hand, just very card dead, but we get ace queen, bump it up to $15, and now face a very large 3-bet to 75 from the cutoff. A tighter, older Asian gentleman, when it folds back to me, we just have to fold this. We're just dominated way too often. It sucks, and it's really hard to fold this when you're quite card dead, but it is the right play, so I fold, and we do see a flop of ace 10-6. Luckily, we are playing show 1, and the cutoff does show an ace, so maybe we're chopping, but most likely we're just up against ace-king, and we managed to save ourselves quite a bit of money there. In this next hand, we have a middle position raised to 15, low jack has called, small blind has raised to 40, we look down at king-queen off in the big blind. Definitely want to isolate the small blind player in position, so I re-raise this up to 125. Middle position now makes the call, low jack folds, and small blind takes half a second, and jams his whole stack in. Oh, alright, we fold, and so does middle position. On to the next hand. We are now in the game for, I think, $1,200 additional dollars. We have a middle position open to 15, low jack and button have called, and we look down at ace jack suited in the small blind. Definitely going to put in the squeeze here. I re-raise it up to 100. Big blind gets out the way. Original raiser folds, low jack folds, and button decides $100 is reasonable, he can make the call. Head to a flop of ace jack 4, 2 diamonds, 1 spade. We flop top 2. This is beautiful. I'm going to start with a check here, and my opponent snap folds. Stage 4. Depression. Under the gun has raised to 15, cutoff has called, and we are going to make a pretty speculative call here with a 9-8 off on the button. Cutoff is someone I want to play a lot of hands with in position. Both the blinds get out of the way. We are taking a flop 3 ways. It comes down 10, 7, 5, 2 spades, 1 diamond. The backdoor flush draw as well as the open ender. So when under the gun bets, cutoff folds, and it's on us, we are going to bump up the price of poker. $100 into the middle, and my opponent calls. We're going to take a turn. It is the ace of diamonds, introducing a second flush draw. My opponent checks to me once again. I take a look at his stack, and he's got about 3 times the size of the pot behind, which means that if we did want to bet, it's going to be around $200. But the chance of us just getting shoved on when my opponent has something he just wants to go with is extremely high here, I think. So I think betting is a mistake here. Folding an open ender would just suck. So I'm going to check this one back and then look to bluff with hands sort of like Jack 8, which is like a gut shot, or that's a double gutter. I'm gonna use gut shots and stuff to bluff with. Anyways, we check back and we see the Jack of Hearts on the river. We make our straight. My opponent once again checks, and I think he's got a pretty decent hand here. He did call a check raise on the flop. If he's got a flush draw, no matter what we bet, he's just gonna fold. but some of his hands do improve, like Jack 10, Ace 10, or maybe some floats like Ace Jack of spades. So I think he's got quite a few really good hands here. I'm going to exploit that, and I'm going to move all in for his remaining $885, around a 3x overbet. And we do put him in the tank. He does think about this one, and we are praying for a call. We'll turn around my session. We'll be sort of close to even, but after giving it some thought, my opponent has, I think, Queen 10 here and decides to let it go. Unfortunate. What better way to keep this momentum going than with Pocket Kings, the second best hand ever created. We have an under the gun limp, and then the older tight Asian gentleman raises to $35. So a very large pre-flop raise for him. A little bit concerned, but then I also have Pocket Kings. So we have a cutoff call and a small blind call, and man, there's a lot of money in this pot. Beautiful. We put in the squeeze play up to 200. Original limper folds. The older Asian gentleman, after a little bit of tanking, does decide to call, and both the other opponents fold. Taking this flop heads up, it is 10, 7, 6, 2 diamonds, 1 heart. This looks like a dangerous flop, but it really isn't. My opponent's going to have hands like queens, jacks, maybe 10s, but the raise pre-flop seems a bit big for 10s. So I think all in all, this is a pretty good flop for us, and I'm going to try and get stacks in. I'm going to start with a small bet here of 150, and my opponent takes his time and then calls. Off to the turn, it is the 4 of hearts, so now 2 flush draws. My opponent's just never going to have a flush draw here, right? I block ace king of spades, king queen, or ace king of diamonds, and he's not going to have too many backdoors here, so I'm not worried about any rivers besides an ace. Even then, I'm not really that worried about it. So I'm going to keep betting. He looks like about 1,200 behind, so about 60% pot on the turn, and river will be very nice. So I put in $400. Now my opponent acts quite quickly and reshoves for $1,250. And this isn't nice. Alarm bells were already going off, and I was already pretty close to check calling this turn. I was getting the sense that this man has pocket aces. And I tell him right away, I have pocket kings, but I don't think I'm calling. And he doesn't seem phased at all that I have pocket kings. He doesn't seem phased at all. And I spend about 2-3 minutes. Like, there's only one hand that beats us here. He never has pocket tens. He never has a flush draw. If he had queens or jacks and wanted to play for a protection raise, I think he would do it on the flop. So I just don't see any way that we are good here. I think he's just got one hand. I love live poker. My opponent has one hand, and we can fold the second nuts, essentially. And yeah, that is exactly what I do. I take my pocket kings, and I save myself $850 and just fold. Yeah, that one sucks. My opponent did tell me it was a good fold later on in the session, so I'm inclined to believe him, and I think he did have pocket aces. He said on the turn he thought I was just pot committed and I was going to just call it off, but no, not that time. Something fell off. The final hand of our session. We have once again topped off. I think I'm in the game for $2,800, something like that. But the under the gun player has put on the $125 blind raise. We peel back one of our cards. It's an 8. The other one is another 8. There is only one move here, and I move all in for $1,500. How this session has been going, I don't feel good about this, but I do believe it's a correct play. Folds all the way around to the straddle, who says he has a pocket pair and has to call. He tosses in the call. We show the pocket 8s. He shows us pocket 6s. We are in good shape here. Let's see if we can hold. The flop comes down. King, king, 5. Pretty good start. We hit a goalpost. Turn. The 4 of spades. Come on, dealer. Keep it high. Keep it high. River. The 7 of clubs. And we are going to scoop this one. This puts us about $2,400 stack as we rack up. And we lose about $300 for this session. I am never going to get unstuck at park. Stage 5. acceptance.
Unless... Hi, Park Casino. Can you put Bluffalo Sam on the 510 PLO? Thank you.
Stage 1. Denial.